Matthew chapter 8, Mark chapter 4, Luke chapter 8. Looking at the same miracle as we did last week, Matthew 8, verse 27. But the men marveled, saying, What manner of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? Mark chapter 4, verse 41. And they feared exceedingly, and said one to another, What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Luke chapter 8, verse 25. And he said unto them, Where is your faith? And they, being afraid, wondered, saying one to another, What manner of man is this? For he commandeth even the winds and the water, and they obey him. So again, what we have here is Matthew, Mark, and Luke all record the fact that of Jesus calming a storm on the Sea of Galilee. By the time we arrive at these verses, the accounts of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the apostles have been miraculously rescued from the storm. They have personally witnessed Jesus calming the storm simply by speaking. So in these verses, we see that the apostles are brought to the acknowledgement of the fact that Jesus is master and Lord of the elements, and that he is master and Lord of the storm. Matthew says there in Matthew 8:27 that they marveled. They marveled. They were astonished. They were flabbergasted. Mark says they feared exceedingly. They were struck with reverential awe. Luke says, and they being afraid, profound reverential awe, wondered. So there they stand, stunned, shocked at what they had just seen, and what they had just witnessed. That even the winds of the sea obey him. They stand in awe of the extent of his authority, the extent of his power. We hear them there in Matthew 8:27, Mark 4 of the verses that we just read. Even, all three use that word. Even, which is a word of emphasis. The winds and the sea obey him. Again, they could have said, the winds and the sea obey him. But all three, even the winds and the water obey him. The wind and the water, or the wind and the sea, are things that everyone knows is beyond the power, beyond the control of man. And they are experiencing or expressing what they just experienced. And in a burst of emotion, even the winds and the sea obey him. Or as Luke puts it, even the winds and the water obey him. They have witnessed, they have personally experienced the absolute, unrivaled sovereignty of Christ. They have come to the realization He is Master. He is Lord of the wind and the sea. And as in all the miracles of Christ, this particular miracle, as in all the rest, is for the exaltation of the person of Christ. In this particular miracle, we see both Christ's humanity and His deity. His humanity is expressed by the fact that He fell asleep. So He is fatigued. He's had a long day. He's tired. He's weary. And He sleeps. In a body of flesh, like all of us, He was subject to fatigue. He was subject to weariness. That's His humanity. His deity is manifested by the fact that He performed this miracle, that He spoke and calmed the storm. He could command the elements, and in so doing, so silence the wind that it would stop the raging of the sea. At His word, the winds and the waves cease. The result, there is a calm. He's the master of the universe. Also, as in all the miracles of Christ, this particular miracle is for our learning. It's for our encouragement. This particular miracle takes us to a night on the Sea of Galilee. It would be a night of what appeared to be, to the apostles, a life-threatening danger. Their dangers never were. Their life never was in danger. To them it was. Carest thou not that we perish? They were in no danger. But to them, it was a life-threatening danger. It would also be a night of miraculous intervention. It'd be a night of the apostles personally witnessing and experiencing the Lord's absolute authority. And it is on this night, on the Sea of Galilee, that Christ stands unveiled as the sovereign one. Unveiled as the Master and Lord of all. So we want to look at this night on the Sea of Galilee. Each account begins with the apostles in a boat. We saw this last week. And it's from this boat that Jesus teaches a great multitude, and He does so in the hearing of these apostles. As evening began to approach, Jesus said to the apostles, "Let us pass over unto the other side." When Jesus spoke those words, The apostles had no idea of what they would soon experience. But whatever it was they would experience, they would do so with Him. And that's the key. And we, like them, Proverbs 27:1, know not what a day may bring forth. We know not what a moment may bring forth. And I imagine, again, it's been a long day for Jesus and the apostles. I imagine when Jesus said, "Let us pass over unto the other side, send the multitudes away." They thought they were going to the other side to get some rest, to get away from everything. And it appeared, when the journey began, that's exactly what was happening. Luke says in Luke 8:23, notice there's 3 words there. As they sailed. As they sailed. That's a picture of smooth sailing. As they sailed. There they are. In what was probably a quiet, starlit night in the Sea of Galilee, as they sailed. A picture of ease. A picture of comfort. But this smooth sailing would turn into a storm. Again, as they sailed. And I imagine the apostles probably reviewing in their minds and talking about the amazing events of the day. And what a wonderful day it was. Some point, as they were sailing, Jesus goes to the hull of the ship. Luke 8, verse 23. As they sailed, He, Jesus, fell asleep. He fell asleep. As He was doing so, as He was sleeping, Luke 8, verse 23, there came down a storm of wind on the lake, right where they were. Matthew says in Matthew 8:24, and behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea. And Mark says in Mark 4:37, and there arose a great storm of wind. So both Matthew and Mark interject the adjective great to describe the storm. So it was a storm in large in size and remarkable in magnitude. It was a great storm. All 3, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, begin their descriptions of the storm with the wind. That's where all 3 begin. They begin with the wind. Mark and Luke calling it a storm of wind. Matthew referring to it as a tempest. A violent, swirling wind, accompanied by rain and or hail. But there's an emphasis in all 3 accounts upon the wind. They have without warning and quite suddenly gone from as they sailed. They've gone from that to a storm of wind. to a great storm of wind, to a great tempest. And as a result of this wind, Matthew 8:24, the ship was covered with the waves. The wind disrupted the water. Mark says in Mark 4:37, and the waves beat into the ship as a result of the wind. The waves beat into the ship, the extent so that it was now full. Luke said as it was coming in faster than they can get it out. Luke says in Luke 8:23, and they were filled with water. So they've gone from, as they sailed, they've gone from just sailing along to being tossed by the circulatory winds. And the waves are breaking over the boat. The boat is filling with water. They realize we can't keep up with this. We're going to sink. Again, they've gone from gently sailing along to a storm of wind, to a great tempest, to waves. This quiet journey is suddenly interrupted by fierce circulatory winds resulting in crashing waves. This is no small disturbance. It's a great wind. It's the situation is like what we read in Psalm 107, verse 26 and 27. They mount up to heaven. That is the boat being raised to the top of the wave. They go down again into the depths. The boat plunging due to the waves. They reel to and fro and stagger like a drunken man. Speaking of those on the boat. They've lost their balance and they're hurled from side to side. And they're at their wits' end. Certainly the apostles were. We perish. That is, they are at the end of their wisdom. They're at the end of their knowledge, their understanding. They're at the end of their ability. There's nothing else they can do. We see them here in Psalm 107. This isn't describing the apostles. It does describe the scene. They're anything but in control. And so it was that night on the Sea of Galilee. The apostles are anything but in control. How many times you hear people say, and we've probably all said it, I'd just like to know I'm in control. I have control over things. Well, I got news for you. You never are. Even when you think you are, and even when it appears you are, you're not. You're never in control. And you ought to thank God that's so. So there they are. They've gone from, as they sailed, just probably reviewing the events of the day, fellowshipping. They've gone from that to a state of terror. Absolute panic. Thinking they're going to die. And oh, how quickly life can change. From a starlit night to an angry, raging storm. Just when they thought they were withdrawing for some peace and quiet, they find themselves in the midst of a horrible, life-threatening storm. Your peace and quiet can be interrupted just like that. And so it is with our lives. Things can be fine one moment, and the very next, the bottom seems to fall out. None of us are exempt from the storms of life. Nor are we exempt from the suddenness of the storms. That's why we're instructed not to think it to be a strange thing when we find ourselves in the midst of a storm. Peter wrote in 1 Peter 4:12, "Think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, which is yet to come. Think it not strange, as though some strange thing happened unto you." That is, don't be surprised when trials come. Don't be surprised when difficulties come. Don't be surprised by their suddenness. The mighty, turbulent, and fierce winds come to all of us. And they can come unexpectedly. And they can come from the north. They can come from the south. They can come from the east. They can come from the west. And at times it may appear they come from all directions at once. But there's never a single moment when the winds are not fulfilling the will of God. Never. Or when God is not in absolute control of the winds. Jesus had a purpose for bringing them into the storm. Again, Jesus said unto them, "Let us pass over unto the other side." Response to that, Luke 8 verse 22, they launched forth. Jesus said, "Let us," and they launched forth. And though they did not know what was coming, He did. He did. He knew the precise time of the storm. He knew when it would come. He knew the precise place that it would come. And He knew the severity. And He knew the extent of the storm. And He timed it to say, "Let us go. Let us pass." He didn't time it to avoid the storm. He timed it so they would go through this storm. Let us go. Did He not direct them into the storm? He most certainly did. Which leads to the next question. Did He do so deliberately? Everything God does is deliberate. Did He do so with a purpose? Everything God does is with a purpose. And glory to God, He did so for them. He directed them into the storm for their benefit. Everything that Jesus did was purposeful and strategic. And He said unto them, "Let us go." And all the storms are under His bidding to extend His purpose. And by His direction, "Let us go," He brought them into a situation of drastic and unpleasant change. He brought them into a situation that would be overwhelming to them. He brought them into a situation of danger. At least it would appear that way to them. A situation of trial and difficulty. He brought them into a situation of adversity. He brought them into a situation of struggle. A situation that would result in overwhelming stress. He brought them into that which He knew would cause them panic and dismay and uneasiness. Make no mistake about it. He brought them into this particular storm. He said unto them, let us go. And He knew all about the life-threatening swirling wind. He knows that this is going to bring them to their wits' end. He knows it's going to bring them to the end of themselves. May I say that's a good place to be. People say, I'm at my wits' end. Good. It's where we need to be brought. And regardless whether He brings us into the storm or allows the storm to enter our life as He did with Job, He does so on purpose. And He does so with a purpose. With that in mind, He brought His people into this storm to reveal their level of learning, to reveal where they were spiritually. Again, the apostles have personally witnessed His miraculous miracles. They've been sitting under His instruction. The question is, will they live the truth in which they have been instructed? Will what they have seen and experienced be manifest in their lives? Will they apply what they have seen and been instructed in? You see, it's not enough to intellectually know and learn the truth. That's not enough. We must grow in the truth, and we must apply what we know to our lives. In other words, live the truth. And the storms of life reveal our level of knowledge. Jesus directs us into the midst of the storms to reveal where we are spiritually and how much impact the truth has in our lives. God's people can declare many things about where they think they are spiritually. But the storms of life reveal where you are spiritually. Our reactions to the storm reveal where we are and what we are spiritually. God's people ought to want to know where they are spiritually, and therefore welcome the trials and the storms of life. Jesus brought His people into this particular storm to reveal their lack of faith. This is seen from the fact that he sharply rebuked their degree of faith. Matthew records this rebuke in Matthew 8:26. O ye of little faith. That's never a compliment, by the way. Never. Mark records this rebuke. Mark 4, verse 40. How is it that you have no faith? Little faith? No faith. Luke records, where is your faith? These are not contradictions. There's a reason that each one recorded it this way. Little faith, no faith, where is your faith? Paints a picture. Their faith was so little, to such a small degree, that they acted as if they had none. That ever happened to us? Well, I believe. But then a storm comes and you act like you don't have an ounce of faith. That's what happened here. You see, the storm reveals. The storm reveals. Leading Christ to say, where is your faith? It's not even visible. It's not visible. The storms and trials of life reveal our stature of faith. And without a doubt, there was a flaw in their faith. Their faith was so little that they acted as if they had none. Their faith was so minute, so insignificant, so inconsequential, so limited, so insufficient, that the question had to be asked, where is your faith? So they had a faith that did not carry over into the everyday matters of life. A lot of people have that faith. It's a faith, but it's a faith that has a stumbling block. In this case, the storm. For the Israelites in Psalm 78, verse 13, they asked, can God furnish a table in the wilderness? The wilderness was a stumbling block to their faith. In the case of the apostles, again, the stumbling block was this storm. All of God's people need to make personal examination often. Where does our faith stumble? Where does it stumble? When the finances run out? When health is gone? When you foresee something terrible? Where does our faith stumble? And for every one of us, it stumbles somewhere. For most, several places. Faith is the root of the life that we are called to live. Living for the Lord is in direct proportion to our degree of faith. Don't kid yourself. Our dedication, our commitment, our surrender to God are all linked to faith. Our ambition, our pursuit of the Lord is linked to our faith. Our nonconformity to the world linked to our faith. Our degree of transformation linked to faith. Our service to the Lord, our obedience, our following the Lord, our prayer life, our enjoyment of the Lord, all connected to faith. Our joy and our praise, all connected to faith. So if we fail in any of these areas, we need to get to the root problem. A lack of faith. A lack of faith. Without faith, the Christian life is non-entity. It doesn't exist. Faith is an absolute essential to the life we are called to live. And the Lord in His goodness uses the storms of life to say, this is where you are. Look at the storm. Listen to yourself in the storm. Hear yourself in the storm. Master, carest thou not that we perish? Listen to that. Oh, the unbelief. Listen to yourself in the storm. It tells where we are. Anybody can have faith sitting here. That's not what reveals faith. Oh, I believe when everything's going well. I believe. That's easy. That's not what reveals faith. It's the storms. It's our reaction to the storms. Jesus also brought His people into the storm to reveal Himself, which in turn should strengthen what? Faith. The miracle is recorded, as all the miracles of Christ, to show Him, to reveal Him. He brings us into storms. Sometimes He allows storms to enter into our lives, but both to reveal Himself and to reveal ourselves. We all need to view the storms because of their purpose. They're gifts. They're gifts. We preached not too long ago on the gift of suffering. It's a gift. It really is. If you look at the purpose, they're gifts from God. Jesus is revealed as the Master and Lord of the storm. The apostles are in absolute panic. And they awake Jesus. Matthew gives record. Matthew 8:26. He arose and rebuked the wind and the sea. And there was a great calm. Mark says, Mark 4:39, He arose, rebuked the wind. And then He tells us what He said. And said to the sea, peace, be still. The result, the wind ceased. The result of that, there was a great calm. Luke says in Luke 8:24, He arose and rebuked the wind and the raging of the water. And there was a calm. Jesus spoke, and it was so. He revealed His sovereign authority. He speaks, and the entire Sea of Galilee instantly is calm. He's teaching them. He's showing them His all-encompassing, all-sufficient authority. There He stands. I believe they're still tottering back and forth, being cast from side to side. There He stands. He's not tottering. He's not trying to gain His balance. He's the Master and Lord of the wind. He's the director. and the controller of the storm. It's like Psalm 107:25, for he commandeth and raiseth the stormy wind, which lifteth up the waves thereof. And there he stands. What are their eyes now upon? They're tottering, they're being cast to and fro. There he stands. What are they looking at? I believe they see him. I believe that's the focus. He stands in their presence as the master and Lord of the storm. We need to see that. In all of our storms, we need to see him standing. We might be falling all to pieces, but there he stands. The master and Lord of the storm. He commanded the very elements, the wind and the sea that he created. And the result, the violent winds and the turbulent waters cease. As a result of his authoritative word, the apostles stand in awe. What manner of man is this? That even the wind and the sea obey his voice. We have no idea of what may come into our lives. And we don't need to know. It wouldn't do us any good if we did know. Because if you did know, here's what you would do. You would make human plans to get through it. You would dismiss God. We don't know. But know this. He is the master. He is the Lord of the storm. Well, you don't understand, my son. He is the master. He is the Lord of the storm, regardless of the storm. Regardless of how difficult it may be. And he is greater. And he is more than the storm. Always so. The storm and he are not on equal footing. He is greater than the storm. When we find ourselves in the storm, you say, well, right now I'm just sailing along. Well, good. That's not going to last, by the way. There's a storm coming. Unless you died just like that, there's a storm coming. You'll find yourself in that storm, but you need to see him. Need to see him. Our tendency is all we see is the storm. We need to see him. And we need to see him as master and Lord of the storm. And how thankful and full of praise we ought to be to know. To know. Know it so much that it translates into our life. That he is master and Lord of the storm. Brother Ben, if you'll come and lead us